I still don't have a use case for Kubernetes personally straight away, especially if the networking still isn't a thing. I don't quite know if right now can I build a service instance or a service broker that deploys things to Kubo, and is there a way to expose that to its routing thing that the apps can talk to it? Is that solved, or am I still left with a routing problem that I have every time I have to do a service broker service instance type thing? It is just incredible in 2017 that every conversation about Cloud Foundry, it's like the orphan child that turns up to Christmas and fed at breakfast, but we don't refer to them as a member of the family. Just services are so under discussed and under supported and under considered.
We have a buzzword now. Basically solved.
Basically,
we've got two
sidecars.
We've got two buzzwords. We've got Kubernetes. Now we've got like an opinionated way. If you've decided that you can't just run your data service like everyone has been doing for 20 years, perfectly recently, by getting a really large bare metal box and running a vertically scaled database on it with a backup, you can now use Kubernetes to do that. For some reason, that makes you happy.
Well, I'm excited for the life cycle of larger clusters. I'd like to see more people exploring the world of long-lived, highly available clusters of things. The life cycle of them up there.
I disagree. I think what most people
say I'm wrong about what I'm excited about.
I disagree with your excitement. So let me curb your enthusiasm.
Can we not have that point of me the entire time?
Yeah, no. The idea is whoever's speaking. So yes, thank you for reminding me.
I think what you honestly find for large clusters, what most people who've actually run large clusters find, is that it's much better to pull the state out of those clusters. Right? That's MapReduce.
We're talking about a cluster of Postgres,
for example.
Right.
I think having 400 Postgres servers is not a great way. It's not a recommended configuration of running Postgres, right? If you have a traditional database.
Hang on, are we talking about 400 users of Postgres? You're saying you'd rather have one Postgres cluster
I'd rather have one large maintained Postgres cluster, because actually the big problems of maintaining a Postgres are not technical problems. They are operational problems. You have to run ops. You have to manage that Postgres. You have to scale it. You have to recover it.
But isn't the idea of running one Postgres akin in a sort of saying that we shouldn't use Cloud Foundry, we should just not touch that box ever again? I mean, or something like we went down the path of cloud native with apps, and we learned to not write to file systems that were going to be ephemeral.
Right.
We build constraints around them, and we know how to write.
Yes.
But we don't know how to run long-lived, highly available databases because we refuse to talk about it.
I think it turns out we sort of do, but the point is not everyone needs to. This is what Google found with MapReduce, right? They didn't want everyone reinventing how to process large amounts of data, right? But everyone in the company needed to process large amounts of data. So what did they do? They had the people who understand how to build scalable, clustered stuff, build that, and then everyone else just writes map jobs and reduce jobs, and has it run. Right?
Where does that metaphor break down in the Cloud Foundry world? As an app developer, I still don't care about Postgres.
Yes.
But doesn't mean that I want my Postgres. I don't care. Fundamentally, I don't care whether my Postgres database is on a shared machine or not.
Right.
Until there is a thing for which I do care.
Let me put it this way. RDS exists, right? Over time, I think the direction of travel is for things that look like RDS. Right now, there are some reasons not to use things like that because they're still expensive. But they're going to get less and less expensive as we get better and better at running them. I can't imagine why you'd want to run your own RDS. That is such a hilariously solved problem. Having a database, that to me, the platform provides, and the platform may be someone in your company. There may be a team who is providing your highly available database. But the way we generally run those things, like the advantages you get from containerization, aren't really advantages that are helping you much with this. Databases don't get modified often. You're not doing rapid development on containers. You have statelessness.
So my story, I appreciate what you're saying. So I'd like to clarify my story of this. Because it's not necessarily a story of the app developer starts to care more about this because it's in a container. Sure. Like the app developer still doesn't care. which is why I get confused by people's fascination with Kubernetes and saying all things are interesting.
Yes.
All things are not interesting.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, so just for anyone watching historically, for the last 2 years, I was doing a thing called Dingo PostgreSQL, which is like on-demand provision 2 containers of Postgres. Inside those containers, it did the whole life cycle of forming a cluster. It had etcd for coordination of leadership. It had a thing called Patroni, which did the state machine of what role to play, and thus configure it locally to be a leader or whatever, or flush the database and form it, do backup automatically, restore automatically, all that stuff. That could be dropped on Kubernetes. That could be dropped on any container platform. What I didn't have was an answer to how do I do the networking, and the continual rotation of credentials. We talked about this, obviously we want continual rotation of credentials. Zero effort has gone into VCAP services being rotated.
So this is what I'm getting at, right? So it might be that for something like that, Kube is going to solve your problems. Today, your experience is it actually doesn't, because it doesn't really
wouldn't change any of the actual problems.
Case. Exactly. But perhaps something does. What I would argue is that what's happened this week, and I think it's the right thing, if I'm honest, is that we've made a decision that CF isn't what's going to solve that problem, right? The problem of running that cluster Postgres. It used to be this thing. Are CF and Kube like different things that container orchestrators, different abstractions? They're not. There is container runtimes, and Kube may or may not solve your problem. And frankly, I think most problems are better solved by not doing that stuff in that stateful environment. CF is going to focus on, we're going to make it really easy to push your app and bind to someone else's solution for that.
Right. So
the really important thing about that is that the number of people who are pushing apps is large, and they're getting pushed repeatedly and upgraded repeatedly. You're doing rapid development on them that you really want to speed up. Like, there's value in being able to go really fast at getting new versions of apps out.
So
on the other hand, you can solve the problem of being able to deploy a database for someone, or frankly, just get a highly scalable database and pull out an account once in one team, and it's solved. I don't need that to be made substantially faster. In the same way I need app development to be made substantially faster.
Right. Again, your role as an app developer is you don't care.
Right.
My role as trying to provide the database on demand, whether it's shared or
what I'm
whatever,
saying is,
but
I don't think Cloud Foundry
is made exceptionally difficult in the Cloud Foundry space because we refuse to provide services.
So that was the third thing I was going to say. I do think we are now starting to get, now that we realise that there's two separate things, there's Cloud Foundry, which isn't going to try and solve the problem of running those things. Because actually the problem with Kubernetes is it's tried to solve too many problems, I think. Cloud Foundry is going to be a focused thing that solves the problem of stateless apps. Now that you've made that decision, and we're saying Kube is off the side and whatever's off the side, now we can try and solve this in what I think is the real way, which is now we have this Envoy and Istio work that we're talking about, and this container networking and all that stuff. It's not about running those things in the platform. It's about actually saying these things are mostly going to run outside the platform. How can you make it really? How can you make
so for anyone that's not here and missed the whole, the other exciting thing to me is probably not Kubernetes so much as the networking, sidecar, SEO, Envoy stuff. So what's exciting about that is, as I'm to understand, Google themselves put local proxies next to apps to say, and that's your app talks to a local proxy as a representation. Sidecar is the new word in 2017 for this proxy. You talk to the sidecar, and the sidecar is entirely responsible for the security, the load balancing, the relationship, the failover, retrying, and your app can be stupid about it. And that's why I was a big fan of Consul when it came out, because it's like the only thing that sort of said, hey, no, you don't talk to the Consul server, you just talk to Consul agent, and it will deal with that. It's like, I love that pattern, the sidecar pattern. So that was exciting on day one when they, we first saw that presentation, right? And then I'm watching it, I'm going, oh my God, you're never going to say it, are you? You're not going to say services. The only use of the word services was to talk about other apps. And that whole talk, it was all about apps talking to other apps. They could not get out of their head that Cloud Foundry has a responsibility to talk to external things and for external things to manage their relationship.
I think that's what's back.
Yeah. Let's see what other people have opinion, just to give a chance.
Opinions.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So Istio or somebody else. Anybody else?
What else did you guys do?
Cornelius, what do you think in terms of what do you see, or even adding up to what Dr. Nick was talking about?
I'm mostly here to listen, to understand, especially Istio, for example. That's something that I'm not familiar with yet. I heard more about it at this conference, so that's interesting. I like the concept. Let's see what comes from that. I've heard more about Kubernetes there, some more opinions, but also there, I think it's really we have to listen to what people actually do with it and what they need. So I wouldn't try to push an opinion how to do it on anybody.
Well, let me ask you this, because I saw your talk, which is related to Kubernetes, where you guys from SUSE are, I guess, announced a product where you can get Cloud Foundry running on top of a kube cluster, and you have a solution for this, which uses, I guess, part of the HPE thing where you visualize, if I use the word correctly, the Bosch releases. Yeah, so maybe you can talk to us about that. That would be, I'm sure other people want to know about this. Yeah. So, oh, for me, yeah, but that's okay. That's here. Is it seeing you? No. Yeah. It's not seeing you. Okay. Yes. All right. Sorry.
So I don't want to talk too much about the product. That's not the point.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
I think the technology is interesting, and we're using it for our product to actually be able to containerize Bosch releases so that you can turn them into a container image and then run.
Yeah, exactly.
For the people watching, 2 minutes, what is Fizzle?
Yeah, exactly.
So Fizzle is this tool which consumes the Bosch release. So it takes the Bosch definition of what is in there, what components are in there, what software is in there, compiles all that, and puts it into a container image, which then can be run on Kubernetes. So it creates the Kubernetes configuration handshakes for that, so that you can actually you separate the build step from the run step, so that everything is built by Fizzle, and then you take the containers, install it with Helm on Kubernetes, and run it there as container images. So that's what is happening there with Fizzle. So it's an extra step you put on top of the Bosch release, and it separates the concerns there of managing managing the runtime of the container from defining the release. So it uses that part of Bosch.
Can you consume a CF deployment right now?
Yeah, that's what we are doing. That's what it's built for, to consume that. So we are doing some tweaks there. So we are specifically selecting what we are doing there. But it's meant as a as a general tool. It's meant for the community. There's no reason why it shouldn't work with any other Bosch releases. So that's what the goal of this project is.
Yeah. The one thing, I mean, obviously you and I were chatting about this. I just mentioned it. Is that once you do this, and you guys will keep updating and anybody can use it, but you also lose something, which is that if you were using Bosch to do some of your operation, you now have to deal with that through the kube layer, right?
Right. So at runtime, then you don't use Bosch anymore. So for somebody who has infrastructure and has the experience, that has built up the knowledge to operate things with Bosch, then it's probably not the right choice. So if you don't do that, but you're coming from a Kubernetes perspective, then you might not want to learn Bosch. Then it might be.
Aside from that, what are the other reasons? Like I heard that your ability to rotate or update Diego cells is a lot faster. Or are there other benefits, like operationally? Do you not know how terrible it is in the Bosch world to be able to containerize?
Yeah, I mean, one thing which I think is a nice advantage is that if you run all that containerized, it's much more easy to put it in a small footprint. So you can run Cloud Foundry on one virtual machine. You can start with that. You don't need 20 to even start with.
We have Bosch Lite.
You have Bosch Lite, but you wouldn't run Bosch Lite in production, right? You wouldn't run.
Oh, you could try.
I wouldn't run. To be entirely fair, I wouldn't run a containerized 101 VM in production either. Like, you haven't. That's not a great plan.
Yeah, I'm not
advocating
that. I'm completely sure that you wouldn't want to do that. But you can start with one virtual machine, then you can see how it works. You can add another one, and the third one, and four, and you already have something which is more reliable. And you don't have to change the model.
I mean, you can do that with Bosch. You can do that with Bosch today. You deploy all your services with VM.
Can co-locate them as long as you unscrew the network.
It's just a matter of that. Especially now we have the BPM thing. If you've seen this,
that makes it much better.
Now increasingly the processes are containerized. They won't clash.
Right. My concern for you guys is that you have such a long history, both of long-lived staff and new staff, of wanting to do things the way you're doing them, that whether there's ever the chance that you'll actually go back to doing it with Bosch. I know Bosch wasn't very good 5 years ago when you decided not to use Bosch. And I was like, it's been on this long.
So one thing I should tell you,
I mean,
he's a committer on Bosch.
Yeah.
So he knows
I
that
would-
very
I would-
well.
We didn't decide to not do Bosch. I mean, we are doing Bosch. We are contributing to Bosch. We have people in the Bosch team who are working with that. We are providing Bosch stem cells. We are working on the Bosch CPI.
And I'm not
for
trying to convince you or anything.
like
I spoke, so it's
So that's something, as I said, I think there are different use cases. There are just different
So
perspectives.
that's what I'm asking. So, okay, so you've got the co-location or the smaller footprint, right? So because you can jam all these VMs or these Bosch jobs into a smaller Kubernetes footprint. Is there other things? Like I'd heard that it was faster to update. Is there any other sort of?
Yeah, I mean, spinning up containers is fast, so you don't have to do the recompilation or the redeployment you do with Bosch. So that's certainly an advantage. But I would argue that all these technical differences, that's probably something where you can find optimizations and solutions in either way. I think it's really, from my point of view, that's more my personal view here. It's more really for, in what kind of ecosystem are you? What are you familiar with? What kind of user experience
Where did you
do you
grow
want to have? But where do you grow
It's
up?
hard because Kubernetes is not like it's 20 years old. Like it's all very new.
It's fair.
Well, no. The real question to me is how are you deploying your Kubernetes, right? Because I'm really interested now that there's this way of deploying Kubernetes with Bosch.
Yeah.
That seems like it gives you this opportunity to manage everything in one way.
Yeah.
And with that, you have to deploy your kube somehow, right? You've got your kube in the first place, whether that's with Chef or Ansible or whatever.
Yeah.
That to me is the question of, is Bosch actually a potential use case there? Because as soon as you're deploying your kube with Bosch, then I think you should just deploy your CF with Bosch. And now you really do have just one thing to learn, right? The question is it practical for you to deploy kube with Bosch? And if not, why not? What's that like? What does that look like in your organization?
I mean, for us, it's not really the question, because for our Cloud Foundry product, we just assume Kubernetes. It doesn't matter where it runs. I mean, it could be maintained by Google. It could be Kubernetes as a service, or people use whatever they use. They could use
Did
our
you
product,
just say
they
you
could
don't
use
care? Is that what you just said?
Well, we are not completely not caring because we care that it works. So it should work. But from an architectural point of view, it doesn't really matter because our interface is Kubernetes.
No, but operationally, right?
Beyond
The health and well-being of Cloud Foundry is still proportional and restricted by the health and welfare of the kube cluster under there.
Sure.
So we have to care.
Yeah, but I think people, independently of Cornelius's kind of view of it, is that people want to have one solution in terms of, you have a container farm and then you can deploy different. No, I understand, but people
never can have one solution because you have to deploy the kube somehow. And you can't deploy kube with kube.
No, I understand, but the point I'm making is that
Inception.
it's the idea of like, why do, like, I guess, if you're treating these VMs as like the main resource that you're paying for, if you now put containers on top of these things, you increase the density, right? All of a sudden, because you can now maybe use part of your cluster to run Cloud Foundry, would shrink it.
Yeah, but on behalf of the people who desperately wanted the CF deployment, CF release default footprint massively smaller because it can. It is just, it's defensive, not the right word, but that is scratching such a long-lived pain of mine that it's not fair to say, oh, we have Kubernetes, that's a solved problem. It's like, no.
We should solve it differently.
The CF
All right, fair enough.
release team, or whoever the release team is, should have been solving this for the last 5 years.
Okay, so this is great. Oh, hold on a second. This is great. This is great. Okay, so let's jump off the Kubernetes. Unless somebody has a burning thing.
Yes,
you have a burning
I
point?
want to say this one thing.
Right.
I know a fair bit about containers. Containers are processes, right? Bosch orchestrates processes. There's nothing about containers that gives you greater density. If you want greater density, if you want greater density, tell Bosch to put more of the processes on the same VM. You're now done. We already can containerize those processes. We have this little tool called runc, the wrapper called BPM, which most of the Cloud Foundry components are now using, which means you can put all of the things on one side if you like, and Bosch will orchestrate them.
Yeah,
the
big bottleneck right now is the new Bosch operator file thing hasn't actually made it simpler to say, oh, you've got this base deployment that's 10 instance groups. I'd like to move to 3. It actually hasn't helped with that at all.
I think you guys keep missing this point, and you especially, Joe, is that when I mention higher density, I'm not talking just about Cloud Foundry. I'm an organization where I'm running services, and let's say the table here is my sort of footprint for the cloud. Maybe Cloud Foundry is just this piece. The rest of the table is services for this, people running just Kube and so on. And having a unified way of dealing with this is a great.
That's what I like. So at that layer,
No, you hate that?
At that layer, you want isolation.
I'm not so sure about that. I think that goes back to the beginning of the discussion. People want to run on containers for like, their Cassandra databases and so on.
We should provide them containers. Like I'm fine with providing people
containers.
Right. So, but they don't need to be in the same stack.
Oh, so you're saying now I should have multiple container?
I'm saying you need two things. You need to deploy your container platform, and to me, one good answer to that is Bosh, because you're going to need something that solves how do I deploy this to lots of IaaSes, and then you've got what is the abstraction that I want to run on top of that. And Kubernetes is one good one. Cloud Foundry is one good one for apps.
Right.
There'll be serverless ones. There'll be other ones over time. You might want to run Nomad. You might want to MapReduce.
But
run whatever.
It's why do you want to prevent people from saying, I have my container clusters that I'm deploying to Cloud to Kube, and maybe I'm using Bosh to do that. And then part of that is running some Cloud Foundry workloads. Part of that is running, I don't know, like my databases. Part of that is running my serverless and so on. And I have a unified way of deploying all these things. I think it's a beautiful thing.
I agree.
So that's what they're trying to achieve.
I agree that you should have a unified way of deploying these things.
Yeah.
Because Kubernetes can't deploy Kubernetes, the only possible unified way of deploying all these things is Bosh.
Well, I'm not arguing against Bosh. I'm talking about the discussion.
Max is currently arguing against Bosh. That's what's happening
I'm
live right now.
I'm arguing about.
He's doing the Donald Trump approach. So I'm not saying everyone's going to have health care. We have to make some cuts. And
anyways, I don't think we're going to be able to prevent people from doing what Cornelius talked about, which is essentially having Cloud Foundry on top of Kube. The part that I kind of, bit disappointed, maybe not disappointed, but I wish could happen is that I don't have to change the way I manage my Cloud Foundry, because that's what I lose. And hold on a second. And I agree, that's a big problem. But I'm wondering if there's a way to solve it, right? Is there a way to you do that deployment, and then you can still use Bosh, maybe to some CLI extension, to keep managing the Cloud Foundry instance to that. Maybe it talks to Kube. I don't know. I'm wondering.
I think this is like
you're having fun.
I think there is like something like so. This is the thing I was thinking. Like we talk about these different abstractions for different jobs. Like some things are best developed serverless, some things are best developed by containers, some things are best developed by Bosh jobs, right? And the point about this is I need to be able to develop a distributed system and use the primitives that make sense for me to develop that distributed system, right? And the people who decide that are the developers of that system, right? If I've developed something that uses the Kubernetes abstractions to keep myself highly available and clustered, I need you to give me a Kubernetes cluster for that. If I've designed it with serverless, I need a serverless cluster for that. The Cloud Foundry developers currently have designed it based around Bosh, because Bosh makes their life simple, keeping a highly available system when you use it with Bosh. Now, there are restrictions in Bosh. There are things that we have to design for Bosh, and then Bosh gives us a lot for free, right? And that's why CF uses Bosh. Now, you can kind of try and put Kubernetes in there underneath, but I think as long as the developers aren't using any of its features, we're not going to get that much from it. Because you have to take advantage of the abstraction for it to be useful.
So there are two hypothetical questions. So I mean, the reason why Cloud Foundry is using Bosh and not Kubernetes, one of the reasons is that Kubernetes just didn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's one reason. So my hypothetical question would be: if you would start today, designing Cloud Foundry from scratch, right? Where would you start?
So that's exactly my point. If CF was being developed to run on Kube, then sure, right, absolutely. I think if we made the decision, hey, to be honest, maybe they would write it serverless. Who bloody knows?
I'm sorry. Yeah, but I disagree, because I agree that
This is what all the cab calls. I can't believe I missed all these cab calls. These were awesome.
I'll mention one thing, and then we'll see if other people have other points they want to raise. But it's an interesting point, right? That we are the one developing this. and we made some decisions, but life changed. There's new. Hold on a second. I give you a chance to talk. There's new information, right? I don't want to stick with old things. If there's now better ways to do things, could we evolve it to use those better ways? And that's what I'm asking.
And we might, but that's a decision that the developers get to make.
Oh, come on, but we're part of the developers.
Actually, I'd like to ask a question about this.
And you're part of it.
So hang on.
No, I'm saying Bosch. We're committers on Bosch. We're committers on Foundry. So we could discuss it. No, I'm saying that we are part of that decision making. That's part of the discussion. So don't use the argument that the developers chose because we are the developers. We're having that discussion.
But
you're cutting my head though.
But Max, what I'm saying is
that didn't affect his voice though, did it?
There is no right now.
Yeah.
If you take Bosch releases and say I'm just going to point to, you're not going to get much benefit because none of the developers are seeing any of that or using any of that.
Hang on. All right. Interrupt. All right.
Yeah.
The pretext, everything you've said has been that the developers are the choosers and it's all about their benefit. But Bosch wasn't built for the developers of Cloud Foundry. Bosch was built for the SREs, the operators.
I disagree. I disagree because they're the same and they were the same originally.
They were the poor sods trying to live with the chef-orientated one. They're the ones that...
Because I was one of them. We didn't have an ops team. We used to CF push to production all the time. We used to Bosch deploy to production all the time. So when I say it's for the developers, it's because we were responsible. Okay, it's the Google model. You get our SRE eventually. We got CloudOps eventually. But initially, we were responsible for pushing it to production, and Bosch let us not think about that too much. Right. It solved that problem for us, so we used it. Maybe now we would use a different one, and maybe in 6 months or a year,
we could evolve
we'll use a different one.
Yeah, exactly. Then we should do that. That's the discussion we're having right now.
This is the one letting me speak.
No, but you dominated the discussion here. Total. Yeah, but you need
I'll
to get
throw myself on the audience's judgment on that. All I'm saying, Max, is right now we're using Bosch.
Yeah.
We could decide to use Kubernetes in the future.
There's a graph of who's speaking the most.
But until we decide as a development team to use it, then there's going to be limited advantages. It has to be a decision that we make as developers in the community, and then to use it, which we could do. We change technologies all the time frequently. Then we threw away God Limit, which I wrote, and made Garden Run C, and I'm glad we did it. And we'll throw away lots more stuff, but it has to be from within the community, or it's not going to happen.
That's the community discussion. So you're asking to do it, and that's what we're doing. So anyway, let's see if there's an opinion on this topic of Kubernetes. Victoria?
Yeah, I came here just to listen because we're evaluating the value of Kubernetes. So I just wanted to hear some different opinions on that. Because as for me, I know as Cornelio said, it doesn't make sense to push your own opinion in this regard because there could be multiple use cases. So I just want to figure out what are other use cases.
Right. So for container runtime, so I'm new to all these discussions. So for the container runtime, are we building the standard interfaces so that other container runtimes can be plugged in? Yeah.
I don't know. That's one of the
specific to Cube.
It's very I think this is the problem that we have. Cube is a really big service, right? People say, I just want one way of deploying all this. So just let's use Cube. But Cube is enormous, and Cube has a lot of UX, a lot of higher up opinions nowadays. Which I think if Cube was a smaller thing, and I would agree much more quickly with this point about let's just use it and let's have just one standard thing. But Cube is a very large thing for me to support and understand. And honestly, personally, as a developer, I wouldn't want to support something written on Kubernetes. Like right now, today, if something blows up, the amount that I have to understand to support one of these systems is just really large and rapidly growing, right? And today, it's not something that solves a problem that I have. There are people whose problems it solves brilliantly, right? People like some of the things Dr. Nick was saying are brilliant use cases for this, but we don't have these problems. So why would we want to kind of volunteer to have?
I mean, there are places.
Momentarily, it's meant to bring visibility. Of course, it's just bringing more complexity in a system that is already complex.
Yeah.
And for myself,
I applaud Cloud Foundry. In one fell swoop, we went from already massively complex to
Yeah.
Boom.
I'm concerned.
It's
in
fractally
small
complex.
scale, and at small scale, I don't want more complexity because complexity is also the first problem I have to address.
I think one of the things that happened last summit is they announced Kubo, and it seemed like we were fixing problems that Kubernetes had, right? Because they didn't have a way to deploy, they didn't have day 2 operations on. And now we're announcing container services, but there's not enough detail to understand.
Container runtime.
Oh, runtime, sorry.
It's still not about services. It's still about applications.
Container runtime, sorry. Thank you. And it seems like it's gonna fix problem we have, and it's not very clear. So I think trying to identify this and figuring it out, and of course you have one solution, other people have different solutions. Would be good. We'll see.
So I have one more thing. Julian, your presentation this morning was really good on serverless, and I see the year of serverless and the functions way of thinking and building application is not arrived this year,
right?
But I'll see like late 2018 or 2019 is there will be like tools that will be coming out, like how you design the workflows and invoking functions, and you have various versions of functions and how you do that and develop that. So what are
You use Bosch, by the way.
so what are you thinking on that topic and how we are going to evolve?
I think this is the really interesting thing about this container and application runtime, right? There was this confusion that what we should be doing in the application runtime is stuff that's this container stuff, and it's more complex, not less stuff, right? I actually think the more we can like forget about this and say that's Kubernetes thing, we'll stand it up for you, we'll make it easy to manage, we'll do that in Kube, the more we can lean towards this stuff, which is I think where we're really headed and should head, which is I don't want to think about containers or packaging or orchestration or anything. I just want to push code and have it work and bind to these services.
We should constantly be asking the question, what would make me happy as a developer?
Yeah. And one thing I'll say about this, one thing I think is interesting about this stuff is what we have to be careful about is new technologies come out and they can be really, really good. But if you just add them without taking something else away, you tend to just add complexity. So if we took Bosch and replaced it with Kube, yes, okay, now we can have a discussion. But if you take all the same stack and like add another layer, then I think it tends to just add another layer, right? I think that's where we have to be careful about this whole thing. Is there something to be said for just keeping 3 simple systems rather than one very complex?
Well, I like that we're taking the networking ideas and some of the code. Yeah. That's nice.
Can I ask a question? What do you think about the feature to push Docker containers to Cloud Foundry so that you just do a CF push?
Docker
Does that
images.
have a place in
Docker images?
Docker
yes,
images?
yes,
Yeah. Does that have a place in Cloud Foundry, or is that something which should be in the container runtime?
I really think it does, which is why I wish they hadn't called it the container runtime. I think it's not really about it's the orchestrator runtime versus the application runtime. It's like, are you going to care about orchestration? It's lovely that you can push code and we'll just run it. But to be honest, there are many use cases where just creating an image and pushing it is great. I don't think we should get into all the extra stuff you can do to orchestrate those containers and customize them. But being able to ship your code to me in a pre-compiled way seems great. And one thing we've been working on is to use layers and use OCR images more in the platform. So what I'd love to get to is for one day, the build packs are just another way of building an image. And when you stage with the build pack, you just get a URL and it's a Docker Hub style URL, like an OCR URL, and it stays patched over time. So I can use Cloud Foundry to stage that, and then because it will use the build pack model, it will keep being a patched image over time. I can take that and push it to Kube. So when you want the development efficiency and rapid application development of Cloud Foundry, you can either use build pack or use Docker container, and we'll do that. And then as soon as you want to pull the escape hatch and you need all this stuff, if that should ever happen, you take that image that you staged and you know that that exact same thing will run on Kubernetes. And it's the identical thing, and it's a thing that will keep patching that root address on from your Cloud Foundry installation. And then you have something that I think works really well. Like container images are great, right? Like I think it's great that we have that escape hatch.
But you have this problem that once you create your container yourself, that you are suddenly responsible for all the layers.
You now have to make the pipeline, right? You have to make a pipeline. You have to accept it. If you use the build pack model, there's some things which aren't as easy, but we can keep it patched because we prevent it sometimes, right? So we'll keep that patched over time. But there's nothing that's actually orthogonal to images. If you see it, it'll still be an image.
let's see if there's a if there's a question or like comment in terms of things that was interesting besides, you know, kube and containers. Anything else to highlight?
No.
No? I think Nick talked
but
about
I-
Istio, which is
I'm ready to say something.
new topic. All right, exactly.
Well, I find it cool. I'm sorry, but I mean, it brings some more life. It might sound like it's chaos because we are not sure of the direction we have got. Capabilities, what's going on. It's bringing visibility. I want just the basic. I want to say is we live in a world where we want to say I think we should do this way and it's the correct way. But we also live in a world where people tend to get interest in something which is sometimes irrational. And we also need to stop doing things that nobody cares about.
That's not
Even
fair.
if
You shouldn't talk about Docker
it's
that
right.
way. All right, that's not. That sounds right.
So in that case, we might be at a point of
Docker
time
Live
where,
matters.
where we don't really know what's going to be.
Yeah, we got to experiment.
We have thoughts, but so it's still good that something brings something new.
Of course.
And we'll see.
And this is part of why I was pointing to this visualized approach, because it was an idea that they had in the past, they put in the past, that people discussing, you know, what Jules was talking about in the keynote for how to do serverless. You know, so there's a lot of excitement going on in the community.
But please, about Fisio, stop saying it's gonna break Bosch.
But it
Stop.
does. Well,
The-
That's not the point.
it doesn't break it. It just
No,
can't. You
it's-
don't
it's
use
the-
it anymore.
How is it subtitled? It's subtitled the Bosch disintegrator. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like that either. So that's not what we are saying.
You should subtitle. I love Bosch, but still, I also love Kubernetes. I don't know.
I think we're actually saying that. I mean, it's really about, it's not about using Bosch or not using Bosch. I mean, it's about our use case where we decided to use parts of Bosch and extend on that. So we don't want to disintegrate it or break it or whatever. As I said before, I mean, we are contributing to Bosch. We love Bosch.
And maybe there's ways to reconcile, right? I can tell you, I was talking to the guy that created it, and there are ideas that he has to try to make it a little bit better to integrate the two together. Right? So we'll see. We'll see what.
Yes.
We'll see. Okay, let's see if there's anything else that people want to bring up. Was it great here in Basel in terms of the conference vacation?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hanging out in the look, it's a venue like every other venue.
I know, but there's different
Yeah.
city.
Once
you
you're
know.
inside the building, you completely feel what country you're in, the nature of the audience.
Well,
Ben-
the
Ben-
food
Ben was asking-
influence a little
Ben
bit.
came up after my talk and said, "Oh, it would have been great if you could just slow down a lot." And I was like, "Oh yeah," I just sort of forgot that the audience is like it looks like another room in an English-speaking America type environment.
Well,
Like,
but from
probably.
but let me ask you this. Actually, let me ask you this. So from a business point of view, you're a small company and you come here. You have tons of good developers. Was it worth it? Like in terms of meeting new clients, new customers, new old customers?
Yeah, I mean, we have old customers and new ones. So, but I mean, I'm also
No, but was it useful to you, like being here to meet more of them, like folks that you did not expect to meet?
my
like
time is
CTOs
mostly
of
spent
those.
talking to you. And
Really? Wow.
And, I mean,
That's
it's
interesting.
like it's my chance because I now live in Australia, so it's my chance to catch up with the people making and leading a Cloud Foundry thing. So I do spend a little bit of time catching up with the customers and prospects.
Yeah.
Ramon, who's and Brian and others who do a lot of that. So I get a pretty unique opportunity to do that. So that way.
You're the CEO of also a company. Was it useful? Yeah.
It's definitely, it's absolutely necessary to meet people in real. It's so much different when you are face to face and want to. For example, Raven Custer. I've been using Bosch Workspace a lot. I would never have started any conversation over the net about this whole project, but here I could do that. And I could meet all the guys I've been seeing around remotely, but yeah, it's not the same. And
we get a chance to
we
chat.
find interesting.
I gotta say, I mean,
So I guess the point here,
it's
people watching,
definitely-
if you decided not to come because you thought it was not worth it, so obviously there's costs associated with it, but put that aside, there's very good reason to come, right? Because you get the chance to chat with people.
If you're doing anything with the open source projects, tickets, issues, using them, this is, you know, you start to you already know the people by their handles or whatever, and then you don't just walk in as a stranger, right? Like you walk in and you've got people who you're excited to see and meet and chat with. So to me, that's a good conference. A bad conference is where you're like a foreigner to their community. It's like, I'm just going to stay here. I'll go and see some sessions. It's like a conference, a great conference is all about what happens outside of the rooms. It's like doing this, right? The fact that we're doing this, which I know is under the auspices of doing a CAD call, but it's like great that we get to hang out.
No, and I think, these discussions, especially since it's being recorded and so on, it's going to help influence, I think, where things go. That's why I kept on pushing against what Jules was talking about, is that those discussions, obviously we need more people and sub teams and so on, but that's going to help influence where we go.
It needs a little bit of more, the CapCall needs a little bit of more promotion, I think.
Well, we did one thing, there's a calendar for it.
Yeah, it's a calendar now. That's cool.
Yeah, there is one. And then they're recorded. And then I think Roger, who's probably watching live right now, he does these summaries for our tourists.
And also the people who are going to share things, because CAB calls have evolved now where there's more time for people to share.
Yes, so I can talk about this a little bit. So I already know what we're going to be talking about next time. There's the guys from Orange who want to present a Terraform solution that they have, and they want to contribute to CF extensions. So we'll have that, and then I'm working on getting more. So you'll see more of the model of having presentations, getting people to discuss what they are thinking, what they want to add, and then some free time sometimes for discussions, because I think that's important, right? It's important to move forward and not stay stagnant. Decisions you made yesterday, they change. You have new information.
There's also the other one where some of us get a little excited about things a little early.
Yeah.
And then you realize and then we had to talk, and you go down that path too far, and you realize, all right, there was nothing good down there that's worth the cost of continuing.
And we should share that.
Yeah, we should share that. Sandy and Micah had a talk about running Cloud Foundry on Kubernetes
through a CPI.
And they came across all sorts of not possibly insurmountable, but perhaps not worth the cost of the benefit that they saw.
Right.
And so it was an interesting talk. It was an interesting talk about the failures or the challenges that perhaps someone else will be able to pick up and take forward.
And that's why I was pointing to Cornelius, because his talk was right after showing a completely different approach of doing the same thing. So
that's actually something I liked about the conference, that we had these discussions, even during the talk sometimes, during your talk, for example, which kind of evolved into a discussion, which was probably much more interesting than you presenting slides for half an hour.
You haven't seen the slides.
So that's something I enjoyed about this conference. As you're saying, I mean, it's meeting the community is something which is sometimes just hard when you have such a distributed community.
So if you're watching, join us next time in Boston, I believe. Boston. Yes. You remember the date? It's going to be April or something. Yeah. So
I was in as soon as they said Boston, everything else is closed.
Yeah. And if you're in Australia, please tell me you exist. I will probably fly to wherever you are. There's a Bosch guy, Bosch Cloud Foundry guy in Tasmania, and it was awesome catching with him. There is Telstra who might today know they're using Cloud Foundry or not. They keep changing their mind.
I could say the same for France, please. Hey les gars, dites-moi bonjour.
All right, with that, we'll close it. Thank you. All right. Go to stop it.
All right. Time to go to an airport.